Have you ever been in a meeting, heard a great idea, and then wondered, what happens next? How does that spark of inspiration actually become a real funded project? Well, it's definitely not magic. There's a whole journey an idea has to take. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and map out that exact path, from a cool concept to the final green light.
So, how does it happen? I want you to picture a giant funnel. At the top, you've got all these ideas pouring in, tons of them. But only the absolute strongest, most well-thought-out ideas are going to make it through that narrow opening at the bottom and become an actual approved project. Navigating that funnel is what this is all about. All right, so everything kicks off at the very top, the widest part of our funnel. Before any idea even gets a look, it has to fit into the company's grand plan, its vision for the future. And that's where something called strategic planning comes in. You can think of it as the company's North Star. It's about looking way ahead, 3, 5, even 10 years down the road. So before your brilliant idea can take a single step, it has to answer the very first question. Does this actually help the company get where it's trying to go?
Okay, so the big dream is there. The goal is set. But, a great goal isn't enough. The idea needs its first major reality check. Does the company really have what it takes to pull this off? And that's where a SWOT analysis comes into play. This is such a powerful tool because it forces you to look in two directions at once. First, you look inward at the company's own strengths and weaknesses. Then you look outward at what's happening in the market, the opportunities and the threats. Any idea that's going to survive has to play to the company's strengths while having a smart plan to deal with the negatives. Okay, so let's say the idea lines up with the strategy, and it survives that initial SWOT analysis. What's next? Well, it's time to stop just talking about it and get it down on paper. It's time to make it official. This is done with a document called a systems request. Honestly, you can just think of it as the official application form for your idea. It's where you formally lay out the problem you're trying to solve or the opportunity you want to grab. This is what officially puts the idea into the evaluation pipeline. And this request doesn't just land on one person's desk. Nope, it gets looked at by a whole bunch of people. You've got the folks who will actually use the system, their managers, the tech experts in IT, all of them weigh in. This makes sure the idea is solid from every angle before it gets to the final decision makers, who are usually called the Systems Review Committee. Now, the IT department's role here is absolutely crucial, and it can really go one of two ways. In some companies, they're a collaborative partner, helping to shape and refine the idea right from the get-go. In others, they act more like a gatekeeper, and it's their job to screen all these requests and decide which ones are even technically possible in the first place. All right, so if the formal request gets past that initial screening, it enters the toughest, most intense part of the funnel. This is the feasibility study, but I like to call it the project gauntlet. This is where the idea gets seriously tested from every possible angle. The first test in this gauntlet, it's all about the people. This is called operational feasibility. You can just think of it as the people test. Because let's be honest, a technically brilliant system that nobody wants to use or that actually makes their jobs harder is a complete failure. This step asks that super important question. Will this new thing actually work for the people who have to use it day in and day out? Okay, so the team is on board, they're excited. But enthusiasm isn't quite enough. The next big question is a really practical one. Can we actually build this thing? And that, my friends, is technical feasibility. This is a cold, hard look at your resources. Do we have the right hardware, the right software, and maybe most importantly, do we have people with the skills to actually make it all happen? So the idea is popular, it's possible. Now for the million-dollar question. Well, hopefully not $1 million. Does it make financial sense? This brings us to economic feasibility. Yep, the bottom line. It's pretty much a classic cost-benefit analysis. You put all the projected costs on one side of the scale and all the expected benefits on the other. And it's simple. If those benefits don't clearly outweigh the costs, the project is probably dead in the water. But here's something that's really important to remember. Not all benefits show up neatly on a spreadsheet. Of course, you've got your tangible benefits, the stuff you can actually measure in dollars. But you also have incredibly important intangible benefits, things like better employee morale or a stronger brand reputation. A really smart evaluation has to consider both. We're almost through the gauntlet. The project works for people, it works for the tech, and it works for the budget. But there is one last hurdle to clear. Time. Schedule feasibility basically asks, can we get this done in a time frame that actually makes sense? A project that solves a problem but takes 3 years to launch might be completely useless by the time it's delivered. The timeline has to be realistic for it to be worthwhile.
So, what happens to an idea that has survived everything we've thrown at it? It passed the strategy check, it got through the formal request, and it made it all the way through the feasibility gauntlet. Well, now it faces its final judgment. Before that final decision gets made, there's one more key distinction to make. Is the project discretionary, meaning is it a nice to have that management can choose to do? Or is it non-discretionary, something the company has to do, maybe to comply with a new law or regulation? Because that can seriously change a project's priority level. And now the moment of truth. The Systems Review Committee takes all of the information, the feasibility studies, the cost-benefit analysis, the strategic alignment, all of it, and they make the final call. They give the ultimate go or no go. And there you have it. That's the entire journey, from a little spark of an idea to a fully approved project. It starts big with long-term strategy. It gets official with the systems request. It has to survive that brutal feasibility gauntlet, and then finally, it gets a decision. So that's the whole funnel, from big idea to green light, and it leaves me with a little something for you to think about. Now that you know all these different tests, what's a project that seems like a total no-brainer on the surface, but might actually fail somewhere deep inside this process? Food for thought.